first person I came out to was the one with whom I spent most of the time. It was the hardest and the most stressful coming out. I was afraid of reaction of this person, and I didn't want to do any harm. This person was me. Hi, I'm Kira. Today I will share with you my different stories of coming out to people whom I love and respect. I've already told you about my coming out to myself and identifying myself as a woman. It is the most important part of your transitioning. Everything next will be based on your perception of reality, self-acceptance, and love to yourself. Since we're social beings, we're dependent on relationships with other people. Usually the closest ones play the biggest role in our life, and we're most anxious about their acceptance and support. It's a bit easier with friends, because our interests change and our paths may go in different directions at some point. Another part, sometimes not less important than the first two, is our relationships with colleagues, landlords, and our neighbors. Despite them being not so close to us, they often define our way of life and work, and can make a big impact on us. Most transgender people are anxious about whether they will be supported and accepted by others. We love them and don't want to lose. Unfortunately, it is very common that even the closest ones are struggling with acceptance and support, and we have to break connections with them. It is also very common among transgender people to give up the idea of transitioning because of the fear of being unaccepted and unsupported by the family. It is hard, stressful, and painful, but unfortunately, you can't run away from dysphoria. Losing someone is sometimes necessary just to stay mentally healthy and live your true life. We have to carefully think about the words, the way, and the time of when and how to come out to our closest ones. In my case, I had to do it by phone with the majority of my friends and relatives. But there was one person whose opinion was the most important for me and to whom I came out in person. It was my ex-wife. At that time we were living as a couple, and I was afraid of being not accepted by her. After my egg cracked, I knew that I couldn't hide it from her, and I had to tell her the truth. You know that suffocating feeling when you've done something wrong? You feel shame and guilt, and you have to tell others. It was exactly this feeling, but being honest and clear meant much more to me than the fear. One morning I woke up and I knew that it was the day of my coming out. We sat in the kitchen and began the talk. I told her that I had a lot of concerns and anxiety about the way I live and feel myself. First, I came out to my ex-wife as a cross-dresser. It wasn't something due to her because she was aware that I was interested in female clothes and makeup throughout our relationship. I confessed that I don't want to stay in the closet anymore, and I want to present myself publicly as a female. Somewhere deep inside I knew that it wasn't exactly that I wanted. But it was much easier to convince myself that I'm just a cross-dresser, but not a transgender woman. I told my ex-wife that it would happen only occasionally and won't drastically change our life. I was just at the beginning of exploring myself, and I didn't know the whole truth. We talked for the whole day. She accepted and supported me without any additional requirements. During the next 2 weeks, I explored the whole concept of cross-dressing, and I found a lot of information about transgender transitioning from male to female. Most of the information was related to hormone replacement therapy and surgeries. I briefly told my ex about it, just like a fun fact. She immediately asked whether I considered taking hormones for myself, and I said no. It took me just a couple of days to realize that I was lying to myself, and I really needed it. I wanted to transition not only socially, but also medically. Surgeries weren't on the table at that time, so I told my ex-wife that I didn't wish, but I had to transition. I showed her a couple of videos of other transgender families who told about their positive experience when one partner transitioned, and I explained what changes will happen to me after starting HRT. Frankly, there were many more changes than I expected at that time. If you haven't watched the video about the changes I've experienced, check the link below in the description. This time it was much harder for her to understand what was happening, and it caused much more stress. She refused to learn more on this topic by herself. I gave her information in tiny bits, just so she could think about it and understand. This talk lasted for 2 weeks. Every single day we discussed it and tried to find the appropriate way for us. We both were exhausted by this, but my main goal was to hurt her as little as possible. In the end, she told me that she didn't know whether it would work for her, but that I should definitely transition and she would support me. I'm very grateful for her reaction. It gave me that confidence that I can be happy, that I can live my true life, and I shouldn't feel shame and guilt. I thought many times afterwards, if she had interacted in such a supportive way, would it have changed anything for me? Now, It would have definitely made my life much harder and transition much longer. But it was the only way for me to stay alive. The next person who knew about my transition was my mother-in-law. My ex-wife had to share this information with someone to get support, and it was her mom. At first she was shocked, and it required us to support her instead. Thankfully, it took her just a short period of time to get used to it and accept the situation. Soon I had a very important talk with her. She told me that no matter what happens in our marriage, she would support both of us. And now she has one daughter more. I'm blessed to have 2 kids. They are the people that I love the most. I will always remain their father, and I am proud of that. It doesn't matter how I sound or look. Nothing will change my feelings for my 2 bodies. At the time of my coming out, the younger one was 3 years old, and the older one was 8. My kids were okay with seeing me wearing female clothes at home. I came out to my older son just a couple of weeks before getting the prescription for HRT. One day, I took my son, a toy car enthusiast, to the park. I thought that it was the perfect chance to tell him about my transition. I explained to him that it is like being a car with a gasoline engine. But due to God's design, I am running on the diesel fuel now. I feel myself bad, I hardly can function, and I have to be filled with gasoline. In this case, with estrogen, the female hormone, to operate at my best. So Daddy needs to take the hormones to be the fastest car, and to not stay forever in the repair shop. I told him that hormones would change how I look, and eventually I would transition to being a woman. But no matter what, I would still be his father. I would still love him, have fun, play toy cars, and collect mushrooms in the nearest forest. He and his brother will always be my best loved friends. He just hugged me and said, "Okay, Dad, I support you. Can I go and play?" My younger son, due to his age, hasn't realized yet that his father looks different. Surprisingly, he was the first person to call me by my name, and he always refers to me with female pronouns. What has changed him is that he hugs and kisses me much more often. I know that being a transgender person is not contagious, and there is no way to force anyone to feel gender dysphoria. But somewhere deep in my mind, subconsciously, I was afraid of it. I was afraid that by looking at me, they will feel the same, and they will have to go through the same struggles that I had. The only real thing that has changed in them is that they became more open-minded and accepting people. They understand the diversity of different identities, and they respect every choice. My older son even went with me to the Pride Parade, and he was very impressed by it. And then he asked if I could take him with me next year. In most cases, kids are okay with our transgender transition. They only need our love, time, and support. Other things like their parents' gender, clothes, and overall appearance don't matter that much. I was raised by my mother. She was proud of me being a caring son, husband, and father. We had a very strong connection during my childhood, and even after I moved out and started my own family, she always was a significant part of my life. We spent a lot of time together, and she was always ready to help me. Our relationships were based on mutual respect and understanding. Due to her conservative attitude, I knew this talk wouldn't be the easiest one. Before we talked, I sent her a couple of articles about transgender transitioning and how relatives can support the people who are coming out to them. She briefly read but didn't understand why I sent them. I came out to her on the first day I started HRT, just a couple of hours after I applied my first estradiol patch. I did this way on purpose, to have confidence that I already made my decision and there is no way back. It was a very long phone conversation, but mostly it was me talking. I tried to explain everything in the most gentle way. Halfway through, I realized that I'm giving her too much information to process at once. I was preparing myself for 2 months, but I was expecting her to understand everything in one talk. We continued the conversation the next day, but she was still in shock. To her credit, she didn't try to convince me to regret my decision. It was one of the hardest moments she ever had to face. It's been more than 6 months after this conversation, and she's still struggling. But I'm grateful she's trying, and I'm giving her the time she needs. The only person with whom I could share my thoughts during my childhood was my grandma. When I came out to her, I felt relaxed. Despite her age, she initially understood most part, and showed a high level of support and acceptance. Unfortunately, media made a big negative impact, and she was scared by transphobic information that had nothing to do with the reality. It took me a long time to explain that hormone replacement therapy has no significant risks. I'm not a victim of trans agenda, and the number of people who do transition is much smaller than those whose lives were saved by transitioning. She still struggles with these ideas, but I keep reminding her that I'm finally enjoying my life. Most of my friends, regardless of their gender, were okay with my coming out. They're young adults who are aware of LGBTQ+ community and transgender issues. They don't consume mass media and accept everyone's choice. Our friendship hasn't changed, except they call me by my chosen name and use female pronouns. The only person who struggled with accepting me was raised in a traditional conservative family. His understanding of transgender people mostly came from the TV, so the image of me he had was shattered, and it's hard for him to piece it back together. Probably the easiest conversations were with my landlord and neighbors. We have good relationships with them, so I thought that I have to explain them why I'm changing and why I'm looking different. I started telling them the long story of gender dysphoria, HRT, and challenges on my journey of transitioning. They interrupted me and asked only one question: do I feel myself better after making this such significant decision? That's all they cared about. In that sense, I'm very lucky. I came out on social media knowing that I couldn't expect support from strangers. But I was really surprised by the acceptance from LGBTQ+ community, and I haven't faced any major issues from the society, aside from a couple of incidents, though that's a topic for a different video. With everyone I spoke to, I told that I didn't have any other choice. It wasn't anyone's fault this happened. I still love them, and nothing will change that. Before starting my transition, I couldn't fully grasp what changes I would experience. All of my knowledge was based on someone else's stories, so I tried avoiding making any promises or predictions. Most of the reactions I received involved grief, denial, and sorrow. People close to us often perceive our transition as a kind of death. It's hard for them to realize that it's not a voluntary choice. It's a necessity. We're fixing a mistake that happened at birth. We go through so much pain, and during our early stages of transitioning, every word can hurt us deeply and make our life harder. We're like open wounds, needing time to heal, to find confidence, and to believe in our better future. But often during our climb, stable rocks of relationships tend to fall away beneath our feet. We can't go back because we know how it feels, but the climb upward is difficult. At the same time, our loved ones lose the person they remember. Early in transition, a lot of transgender people think that changes will be mostly physical, and their mindset wouldn't change at all. But in reality, we change physically and mentally. We feel, react, cry, and smile differently. We become a different person. These changes are usually positive for us, but for our closest ones, it can be felt like loss. Someone is taking the person they loved and were used to. They can see our changes as something completely negative for them. They go through all stages of grief: denial, bargaining, depression, anger, and acceptance. They need time, and there is no guarantee they wouldn't get stuck on one of the stages. When this happens, they can't move forward to accept us. What can we do? Give them time and talk to them. Both people transitioning and their loved ones need help and support. Ideally, it should be professional help from a psychologist who knows how to work in such cases. They won't try to convince anyone of anything. They will explain what's happening, what are the reasons, and what are the possible outcomes. This really helps passing through initial stages of shock and stress. Unfortunately, nothing can replace professional therapy and counseling. If you'd like to hear my experience of taking further steps in my transitioning, I encourage you to check this video. There I share my story of facial feminization surgery I had undergone after 5 months of starting medical transition. Thank you for being with me. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and see you soon. Bye.